By standard notation, we mean ordinary written music. The sort of music that's learnt by classically trained musicians. Now, guitar tab is obviously the first choice of most guitarists when it comes to how to write or read music. But guitar tab has its limitations. By learning at least the basics of standard notation, you're learning a language that's understood by the vast majority of musicians of all kinds. It's also a very useful thing to know to help progress up through the higher levels of music theory. As an added bonus, once you've learned to understand standard notation, it's pretty easy to be able to pick out melody lines from songbooks, and that's a useful practical skill, either just to learn different melodies or to sort of work out nice melodic melody-based solos on the guitar. Okay, so first off we're going to start out by showing you some stuff on the whiteboard. So we start off with 5 roughly parallel lines, roughly when I draw them anyway, and this is referred to as a staff or stave. Now these lines have no meaning at all really until we put a little sign on them that specifies what note one of the lines is, and this we call a clef. Now in the early days the clef was simply a letter, for example the letter G, and written fairly sort of ornately like this maybe, and that would be sort of pointing at this line here saying let's call that a G. Now over the years this has become sort of standardised to the treble clef or the G clef, which looks something like that. And I'm going to encourage you to actually practice drawing these, because this is a great way to sort of fix this in mind. What this sign is doing is pointing to this second line up and saying that this is going to be our G line. So when you draw a treble clef, you place your pen or pencil on that line to start. You draw a little spiral that goes round and just touches the line above, and the line below comes round and goes up to the top, down through the middle and back a bit like that. So that's our G clef or treble clef, and that's pointing to this line and saying that when we put a note on this line, that note will be the note G. The rest of the lines, the rest of the notes, are then easily worked out from that as a reference. So I just draw another stave here, put in my treble clef. Whee. So there's G, and we just go up like this. That G is on that line. The next note is in the space above that line, and that will be the next letter of the musical alphabet, in this case A. Just above that on the next line will be B. On the space above B will be C. On the line above that will be D. On the space above that, E. On the line above that, F. And it just carries on like that. So it's just above that would be G again. Likewise, coming down, let's just draw another stave here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Treble clef. So coming down from G, we got G on the line there. F in the space below it, because F comes just before G in the musical alphabet. E on the line there. D on the space below. And then in either direction, we can extend the clef indefinitely, really, with what we call ledger lines, just short little lines. So I can now put a note on that line, and that will be C because it's a line just below D. And I can put another ledger line there and put a note underneath it, that'll be B, and so on. Similarly above here, above this G, we could have written a ledger line and put an A, and then B above that one. 2 ledger lines and stick a C above it, and so on. So that's a way of extending notes beyond the range of the stave. Now that's an explanation of how to work out note names from scratch. But as a method to use in anger, it's really too long-winded. So conventionally, students of music are taught a sort of shortcut, which works like this. Firstly, we look at the notes on the lines, and reading up from the bottom line, one line at a time, we remember these notes by the mnemonic "Every good boy deserves fortune." So that's E for every, G for good, B for boy, D for deserves, F for fortune. So that's one half of the notes sort of sorted out. And then the notes on the spaces in between the lines are worked out as F-A-C-E, spelling the word face, which very conveniently happens to rhyme with space. So on the spaces we have the word face, F-A-C-E, again working from the bottom up. And on the lines we have "Every good boy deserves fortune." And you will find that's quite a useful way to quickly work out your notes when you first start reading music. Now if you've been following our music theory course or working your way up the pyramid of guitar music theory, or otherwise covered the chromatic scale as a subject, then doubtless at this point you'll be asking, what about sharps and flats? How are they shown in standard notation? Well, the answer is that they are shown in basically one of two ways. The first is as part of a key signature. Each key has a different signature. Here, as an example, we've got the key of A that has 3 sharps. And if we look at the sharp symbols at the start of the line, each one is positioned on either a line or a space. For example, the first sharp is positioned on the top line. As this is where the note F belongs, as in "Every good boy deserves fortune," this tells us that all the Fs in this piece of music should be played as F sharp. The next sharp symbol in the key signature is placed on the third space up. So that affects all the C notes, as in F-A-C-E, spells face to rhyme with space. So third space up is C. So this sharp symbol placed on the C space dictates that all the C's in this piece of music should be played as C sharp instead. And the third sharp symbol in this key signature is placed just above the F line. A note in this position would be a G, as it's the note after F. So this tells us to play all the G's in this piece of music as G sharp. It's important to notice that it's not only the notes that are placed in the same position as the sharp symbols in our key signature that are affected by it. If we look at our example here, the fourth note along is in the lower F position on the bottom space, but it's still affected by the sharp symbol, even though the sharp symbol is placed in the higher F position on the top line. So that F would still be played as F sharp. Likewise, the last note is played as a G sharp, even though the symbol is placed on a higher G position. Some key signatures are made up of sharps, others are made up of flats. In a later lesson we'll explain why some are done one way and some are done the other. But for now, here's just one example of a key signature that's using flats. Here, the flat symbols are placed on the middle line, affecting all B notes, as in "Every good boy." And this dictates that all the B's are played as B flats. And we've also got a flat on the top space, affecting all the E notes, as in F-A-C-E, spells face, rhymes with space. And that flat symbol there dictates that all the E notes are played as E flat. Often that's all there is to it. But in some music, especially pieces of music written in minor keys, you get additional sharp, flat and sometimes natural signs pop up in the middle of pieces of music, sort of in front of notes here and there. Now, these are notes that we refer to as accidentals, notes that arguably come from outside the actual key that you're playing in. In our example, the key signature is established at the start of the line by the two flat symbols affecting the B and E notes. But the very first B has a natural symbol. That's the one that looks like a sharp with one arm and one leg cut off. The natural symbol effectively cancels out a sharp or flat and restores the note to its natural status. And natural here simply means neither sharp nor flat. Important to notice that accidentals are only valid for the bar or measure in which they appear. After the bar line, the notes conform once again to the default key signature. That is why the second note in our example is played as a B flat. In a key signature, sharps and flats are never mixed, but accidentals can be of either type. So here again, for example, we see a C sharp accidental popping up in a flat key. But once again, notice that in the next bar it reverts to a C natural again in accordance with the key signature. Now there's a question that people normally ask at this stage, which is how do I relate the notes on the stave to notes on the guitar fretboard? Now that's a pretty intelligent question really. So let's deal with that. Now there's a sort of internationally agreed standard for tuning that says that the note A on the second line up of the stave, second space up on the stave, that note is tuned to 440 Hertz, 440 cycles per second. And you often hear that expressed as A equals 440. Now that note sounds like this. So that note is played here on the top string of the guitar at the 5th fret. Now the only problem with this is it means that most of the notes on the stave would be unreadable. Let me show you what I mean. If I was to play each of the open strings of the guitar, for example, from the top down like this, on a stave they would be written like this. Now you can immediately see how hard this would make music to read for guitar players. So by general agreement, guitar music is written one octave higher than it actually sounds. So this is actually how the open strings are presented. But at least now you can read the notes more easily because most of them are actually on the stave. So that's all we're going to cover in this lesson. I hope that's demystified the subject a little bit for you. Now this is one of a series of 3 lessons on the subject of standard notation, so if you feel there is still quite a bit more to explain, don't worry, 2 more lessons to come on the subject. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one of those.